Thank you for joining Resilient Cyber. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Jimmy Mesta. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Hey, Chris. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's been great to have you on in the past. We talked about all things Kubernetes security. We talked about, I think it was the OWASP Kubernetes top 10 and so on. But for folks that missed that episode and don't know you, don't know RAD Security, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I've an extensive background doing a little bit of everything in security. The fun fact is I had one of the first cybersecurity degrees from Penn State, probably 16 years ago now, sponsored by our friends at the NSA. And since then, just AppSec, pen testing, CISO roles, consulting. I mean, you know the drill. It's a vast ecosystem that you can get into. And as I was diving into containers about 8 years ago, I just saw some gaps, and I always had this burning desire to start something. And then we were called KSOC, now RAD Security, was really purpose-built to protect cloud-native infrastructure in ways that I just couldn't find myself back then. Since then we've been growing, and we've been building some really uniquely differentiated capabilities, making our customers happy, and a few years into the journey, and it's all as well.
Yeah, a couple things there. You said that, aren't that long, but sound ancient in our space. Is like 16 years old for a cybersecurity degree. Like that's old, right? Because a lot of universities weren't specializing in that quite yet.
Yeah.
And the program I think you're referring to is, there's NSA and DHS, I think it is, or I believe it's DHS, have like cybersecurity centers of excellence that they nominate within the education, academic and educational community. And I've had the pleasure of teaching a couple of them. But yeah, it's awesome to hear you had that degree for so long. And then also,
we were guinea pigs, so I mean, we'll just say it was really awesome.
Yeah, and then also, talked about Kubernetes and containers, and touching the technology. I think you said 8 years ago. So that's ancient times. That's early days, right? For a lot of folks, they're just now starting to adopt containers in a scale perspective and so on. So definitely early pioneer on that front too. So I wanted to ask you, you talked about, innovative capabilities your team has and what you're working on and so on. You all were recently focused, emphasizing the RSA Conference Innovation Sandbox. For folks that don't know what the Innovation Sandbox is, can you tell us a little bit about that? And then also, about the experience going into it, how you guys, prepared for it, what you got a chance to do while you were there, and, how it's been coming out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Innovation Sandbox is, I think it's on year, don't quote me, it's either 13 or 17. I didn't realize it's been running for so long. It is basically a by submission sort of contest, if you will, to put startups in a position where they can go pitch to a committee of kind of esteemed judges. Almost has some Shark Tank vibes at the RSA conference. It happens on Monday. And from a startup perspective, it's like the startup Olympics, right? For cybersecurity startups. So the process is, you have a submission, you make a pitch video, and there's very kind of strict guidelines on how to do it, timing, etc. There were 2,000 plus submissions this year, which is crazy, and they picked 10. So, and you're kind of judged off of innovation, team, criteria, fundraising, variety of different elements. And I got the email that Brooke, our co-founder, was the one who did the pitch this year. I got the email. I had to do a double take. I thought I was getting fished. Actually, it was like, oh, we're in. And since then, it was just like game on. Preparing. It's 3 minutes on the dot. There's a timer, a buzzer. You were there. There's 1,000 plus people in the room, lights, a DJ. We had a little booth, and I didn't even do the pitch. Brooke did, and I was just so my palms were sweaty for her. So it really, I think, even on LinkedIn, you hear people who are like, it's pay to play and all these things. And I can assure you that it's not. We didn't pay. We're a startup. We're not going to just start throwing money at things like that. So the companies that were there were doing some really interesting things, great founding teams. And it was a testament to the hard work the RAD team has put in over the past 2.5, 3 years into this endeavor. And it just was an amazing experience through and through. It gave the week so much more chaos in a good way. Everyone kind of recognized the name. I had the shirt on, and it was just like, it was really cool. Yeah. So I'm grateful that we had a chance to be there this year.
Yeah, I was there. I checked it out. And for folks that haven't heard of the Innovation Sandbox, I put an article in the comments here from returnonsecurity.com that breaks it down. And they provide some really compelling evidence that, organizations, not even just the winners, but organizations that have been involved in the Innovation Sandbox, that they've went on to be successful, and some metrics around that in terms of revenue and growth and acquisitions and stuff. Definitely recommend checking that out. And I feel you, I was nervous for her, even though, I'm not the one giving the pitch, but it's a big audience, and it's an audience of, people who know their stuff, right? Security leaders,
Yeah.
CISOs, builders, so it's a really incredible audience to get the chance to present to. So it's amazing you guys got to do that. So I want to ask you as well, I came across, and I shared this morning, I came across this article you guys have with the News Stack, where you talk about Kubernetes security posture management. Obviously, this is kind of a building on the topic of cloud security posture management and other tools and focuses we've seen. Can you tell us a little bit about the Kubernetes security posture management piece and some key areas of focus that organizations that are adopting Kubernetes containers, looking to implement secure best practices? What are some key things to call out there?
Yeah, that's an article in the News Stack that we kind of put together. It's a crawl, walk, run sort of format with different segments of what is called KSPM, Kubernetes Security Posture Management. And KSPM is new-ish, but has been around for a little bit. And our foray into our first kind of product offering as KSOC was a real-time KSPM. We're still kind of like built around that nucleus. And I think that article outlines kind of it's a bit of pieces from the OWASP top 10 for Kubernetes, some other elements that I think more modern KSPM solutions should have, being real time, the introduction of workload protection, anything having to do with RBAC, zero trust, audit log, anomaly detection. Those things are starting to get, the lines are getting a little blurry, and for good reason. I think it's all one system. We're kind of, if any takeaway I have is that, like, you can't scan Kubernetes clusters every week and hope that you caught all the things, right? Like, I'm surprised that we're still in the position to treat like Kubernetes as we would a traditional sort of CSPM tool, where, I've even heard of quarterly scans for Kubernetes clusters, which it just doesn't make sense in an environment that, you're shipping, 20, 50, 100 times a day. It's changing rapidly, scaling automatically. So the detection and response piece into the posture, making it all one kind of system, is what that article is all about. I mean, a highlight for me is really just like, and it gets forgotten. It kind of got maybe brushed under the rug, but like, we've had targeted attacks against Kubernetes last year that it like a 10-fold increase, like, just publicly known, right? We even had a supply chain attack targeting kubeconfig files for that was part of a malicious NPM package, right? And we always focus on these other supply chain pieces, but getting the keys to the kingdom in Kubernetes, a la the kubeconfig file or a service account token over permissive RBAC, is bad. Like, it just has huge ramifications for your entire public cloud environment. And I think real-time KSPM is every organization has to have some coverage there, right? And that's table stakes these days. So that article really is the beginner's guide, right? Where it's like step one, the crawl step is like, do you know who has access to the cluster, right? And should they have access? Do you have unused service account tokens? Do you have over permissive RBAC or cluster admin? So that really is the impetus for that. And yeah, it's actually been trending today. I just noticed on the news stack as a kind of top 3 article. So I guess people are starting to care about Kubernetes security, which is good.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are really interested as they, further adopt containers and Kubernetes as an orchestration layer. And, I think you're spot on in the sense that like Kubernetes, I've went pretty far down the rabbit hole, not as far as you and as deep as you, but I've worked with different agencies and organizations, enterprise organizations that are doing platform engineering or setting internal platforms up, running on Kubernetes and containers and so on. And the complexity, especially at scale, is just it's not something you can manually do. Like you can't go through the OWASP Kubernetes top 10 or the KSPM guide and each, check those in a manual fashion. You need to have an automated tool to kind of do these things at scale and in an iterative, ongoing fashion. As you talk about, we're talking about declarative infrastructure. It's ephemeral, it's dynamic. Things are changing all the time. And I think that's why your tool, you guys as a company are resonating with the community right now. One thing I wanted to ask you too, you talked about, software supply chain security. And I know you guys have been big proponents of, this fingerprinting capability that you've been talking about quite a bit. Can you tell us what exactly that is and how, Kubernetes ties into the broader, discussion around software supply chain security?
Yeah, for sure. And obviously I'm speaking to the supply chain pro here, so you'll get all of this and hopefully have something to chime in on. But and I saw a post on LinkedIn this morning, like right before this call, kind of equating the software supply chain ecosystem to like, a pizza shop, right? And like you have to not just like secure or cryptographically sign the ingredients and call it a day. Like the entire supply chain, the CI/CD pipeline, the IDE, all of the bits and pieces that make up what we call the software, supply chain need to be accounted for. And in Kubernetes, Kubernetes just presents unique challenges there because of the self-service nature. Like you're giving developers, the keys to, a sports car, and that's great. We can ship a lot of code really fast and use what we want off the shelf from open source, from public registries, from any sort of package repository. But how do we know what those artifacts are and who produced them and what they do at runtime? So for us, as I took kind of a deep dive into software supply chain probably about a year ago, and still am kind of in this research R&D mode. There's just we're covering the bare minimum at certain points of the SDLC. I don't know, maybe people would disagree and say we have like full complete coverage. But when you really look at what's out there, what's available, what mandates we have, it's not a lot, right? I mean, if we're trying to solve this problem at the end of the day. So our emphasis is a little bit less on the static side, the kind of like open source packages and libraries. Our bread and butter has always been real time and runtime, in more of a shift right sort of mentality. So we decided about a year ago, like what if we could theoretically at this time, at this time it was a hypothesis, what if we could look at the runtime behavior of these open source images, or even commercial or custom images and software, learn the behavior, kind of like encapsulate it in this artifact that can travel with the image itself. And kind of in the same vein as an SBOM would describe the licenses and packages and versions, etc., has a very standard format. What if we could do that for runtime, right? Because things change at runtime. The SBOM is never going to capture all of the network connections, process tree, file system access, the weird and wonky things that happen when we're in this state of running process. So we spent the last year basically building a mechanism to capture those sort of baselines that we call fingerprints reliably, use Git integrations and use modern sort of supply chain mechanisms to embed those fingerprints, and with the hope of moving the industry, one step function further towards better software supply chain security. Right? We have work to do. We're getting there, but that was really the impetus for the Innovation Sandbox. Is like, you can't just react to runtime signature-based detections forever. You will end up in a vicious cycle of false positives and noise, and you're going to miss things that are really important. So we're trying to reinvent that with the most modern technology that we have today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you have the emphasis, like you said, on runtime, shift right kind of approach, where we've seen initially there was a lot of emphasis on shift left, earlier in the SDLC, and we've seen, right, it seems logical, right? Catch things before they get to a runtime production environment, mitigate, vulnerabilities before they're in a position to be exploited by malicious actors. But the problem we've run into is we've created a tremendous amount of noise and toil for engineering and development teams who are focusing on things that are false positives, not reachable, not invoked at runtime, et cetera, not known to be exploited, you name it. How have you guys been received in that conversation of, focusing on shift right, rather than left, and the focus on runtime security? I've seen, we're seeing an uptick, in my opinion, of like cloud detection and response, CDR. I've even seen KDR now, Kubernetes detection and response. Not that we need more acronyms, but how has that been received by the community? That focus of right rather than left.
Yeah, I think I've lived through this shift, or all the shift phenomenons, right? And so have you, where it's like, I don't know where we're shifting all the time. We're always moving somewhere. But it shift left, just to kind of like set the stage, or at least my experience going through that sort of phenomenon, DevOps, and then the transformation to DevSecOps, and early days of image scanning or SCA tools, SBOM generation, all the things that are easier or acceptable to plug into CI. And honestly, when we say shift left, it's just like basically boils down to like GitHub Actions and some IDE plugins. So let's not, we don't need to overcomplicate it. It's what can we do that a developer can get quick feedback on. And there's still a lot of valuable use cases there. I think in security in general, we tend to just like swing the pendulum like crazy, and we're just like, everything's going left. And then all of a sudden developers are like, there's 14 different scans coming up for every kind of PR they submit. And the half of the stuff that they're not even responsible for. And you just get in this like fatigue sort of moment where maybe we shouldn't have shifted everything left, right? And then, to layer on top of that, cloud native, I think, has really just complicated things on the right side. Runtime is not a virtual machine with like that you SSH into and like run a script and like, now I have my application. There's dynamic configuration that's loaded. There's networking policies. There's a service mesh. There's interconnectivity with your AWS API endpoints. There's crazy stuff that like has nothing to do with, or how you have any visibility into, as part of like the actual source code pipeline, right? Like that sort of side of the house makes shift left not a like panacea to solve everything. So I think we just like lost control of that sort of environment a little bit, and now folks are seeing huge gaps in even just basic questions to ask of your running infrastructure, like an inventory of your images, or general posture in real time, trends of different misconfigurations, attack paths that were accidentally opened. These things are getting harder to find because now we're in like teetering into graph theory, because everything's interconnected in the cloud, and that is just not like feasible to shift all of that burden onto the developer. So now we're seeing more detection and response engineers being hired. We're seeing teams being formed that never existed before to kind of untangle this complexity and just apply your basic security posture, detection and response functions in this type of environment. So a huge uptick, and I think like James Berthotti I think he has this phrase like shift left, shield right or something. And like, maybe that's the right thing to do, right? It's probably somewhere in the middle, but we need to invest in catching back up with cloud native, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that catchphrase, shift left, shield right. That makes sense. Kind of thinking left of boom, right of boom kind of scenarios. And I also recently saw like shift everywhere. And I was like, what does that mean? If we're everywhere, we're like nowhere kind of thing, And it's like, you can't prioritize everything. But, we love our catchphrases in cybersecurity. So they're going to keep coming no matter what.
They're going to keep, why is it left and right? Why is it not up and down? I don't know.
Yeah. So all that said, we've run the gamut of the innovation sandbox, Kubernetes security posture management, the work you all are doing around software supply chain security and fingerprint, capabilities. Looking forward here for folks, following you and the team and what you guys are up to, looking at the next, say, 12, 18 months. What are some things on the radar, and where can folks learn more?
Yeah, we have a lot on the radar. First of all, we're hiring eBPF engineers and backend Go engineers kind of across the board. So shameless plug, please hit me up if you like this space, have a security mindset, and want to build something new to market. Please hit me up on LinkedIn. What's on the docket is, we have huge ambitions. I think the momentum we've seen even in the early kind of iterations of this newer methodology, it's just really promising. So you're going to see more open source from us. You're going to see more available to protect, parts of the supply chain in ways that we think are pretty unique. And you're going to see, much more on the capability front from these behavioral fingerprints to extend outside of just workloads, right? You can kind of apply this methodology to other parts of the stack, and that is where things get really, really interesting. Think IAM, identity, et cetera. And you can follow along, on LinkedIn. Really, I'm pretty easy to find these days. So you can follow me or the team or the Rad Security Twitter, as well as just, sign. We'll get you an account, sign up. We're looking for feedback and folks to jump in and try out something new that we think is going to offer a lot of value.
Awesome. So you heard it here, folks. If you're looking to kick the tires and play around with this Kubernetes security platform, definitely check out their site. That's rad.security, as well as they have some open job requisites, it sounds like, that are worth reaching out to Jimmy if you're interested and passionate about this space. So that said, I'll take us out for today. So thanks so much to everyone who tuned in, and thanks for joining us, Jimmy.
Thank you, Chris. Have a good one. Thanks all.